Lawmakers, the U.S. financial system needs a broad overhaul to heal a crippling lack of confidence caused by the credit crisis. Our next guest is a member of that committee and is skeptical about more regulation. California Republican Ed Royce joining us from the U.S. Capitol. Representative Royce, good to have you here with us. What are you so concerned about in terms of more regulation?
Well, we've had the real issue here is the massive expansion of government lending that has come about, and as the plan today was rolled out, you'll notice again that the implication was that the government would come in with funding for these institutions, and we keep widening that that safety net. But as we do that, remember, when we have the next expansion, business expansion, you're going to have even more borrowing, even more leveraging, because the implicit concept here is that these institutions are now too big to fail. They become massive government-sponsored enterprises in a way, since government is guaranteeing it. So like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and I've warned for years about this phenomenon, you would have over-leveraging. They'd be able to borrow at a much lower cost than their competitors. They would find themselves dominating the market. And my concern here is just this, that these institutions that find themselves basically defined in this way are then able to access the market, over-leverage, it wrecks market discipline, and the consequence is exactly what we saw with Fannie and Freddie.
All right, well, wait.
This is my concern with the bailout to begin with, with TARP to begin with.
I understand that, but now we're talking about regulation, and I think there's a lot of folks out there, regular investors, individual investors say, you know what, we need more regulation. We, rolled back Glass-Steagall.
Of course. Wait. We need smart regulation. What we had with government-sponsored enterprises like Fannie and Freddie, we had all kinds of government regulation. They had to buy X percentage of loans, which were very risky, which were low-income loans. They had to put 0% down loans. They had to buy 3% loans. They had to buy subprime and Alt-A loans. Oh, that's a lot of regulation. But was that smart regulation? No. I'm for regulation, but I'm for smart regulation, not having the government direct to the market and then creating this malinvestment, and especially creating in government-sponsored enterprises when the government backfills and gives this kind of credit, which it now is threatening to do.
Representative Royce, maybe we have to go overboard here, though, in terms of regulation, because we went underboard, if you will, over the last decade or so and got us into this situation. So maybe, Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner's got it right. We've got to kind of over-regulate here because...
Wait a minute. I'm the one who's been calling for many years for regulation for Fannie and Freddie. I had a bill on the House floor to do it that my colleagues defeated. They were all for regulation in terms of trying to force the market to do the things they wanted it to do. What I'm sharing with you is that if you make this a political process and you remove market discipline from it, and instead you let the government pick winners in the market and basically imply that some are going to be given this special designation with being too big to fail by a systemic risk regulator, you've created the same dynamics that helped overfuel the money that went into the housing crisis, into Fannie and Freddie. Listen, we all believe in regulation of the financial system. It's how our opponents are redefining this. Some of the very people that helped create this crisis by what they did with Fannie and Freddie to fuel and feed the over-leveraging that occurred there, the arbitrage that occurred in those institutions.
I hear you, but it sounds like, we didn't have a lot of market discipline over the last couple of years, and again, that got us to this situation, and maybe the government doesn't have, the Treasury Secretary doesn't have any choice at this point but to suggest something like this. This is what we need to kind of get everything back on track.
Well, remember, if what you end up doing is making the same mistake we made last time, and converting these institutions and making them operate like government-sponsored enterprises, then you haven't solved the problem. He was a regulator of the New York Fed I mean, you look at the way AIG was handled by the regulators, or the way Fannie and Freddie was handled. My point is that we can have the regulation, but let's not couple that with bailouts. Let's not couple that with TARP funds, and let's not couple it with the access to the federal treasury, which Fannie and Freddie had, and which now, according to this legislation, this resolution authority is going to be given to the Treasury, the President, and the regulator to work in tandem to give that kind of authority when we're dealing with these too big to fail institutions. I frankly think that point has to be raised. I raised it today They acknowledge the argument.
Right.
They just don't have an effective way to deal with it.
I think a lot of points have to be raised, and I think that's what everybody's trying to do. But no doubt about it, I mean, there were a lot of failures. I mean, everybody can point figures, whether it's Republican, Democrats, who was in the White House, and so on and so forth. But so much regulation failed individual investors. I mean, from what I understand, you're concerned about an unlevel playing field. I mean, who's watching out for the little guys, the individual investors? Because they certainly didn't see a level playing field in all of this.
Yes, my point is you had the very regulators, including the New York Fed, the Federal Reserve in New York, they missed all of this, all right? So we can pile regulation on top of regulation, but you will compound the problem if you begin to bail out institutions, if you do what we did with TARP, which I voted against, if you do what we're now doing by giving access to the Treasury. I'm sharing with you, you're going to create a situation when you have the next run-up in the market or the run-up in a bubble in property where, just as with Fannie and Freddie, everybody is going to double down and there isn't going to be the market discipline. These institutions will then overborrow, they'll over-leverage, and they'll run into these kinds of problems.
But some of also what Tim Geithner's also talking about, Representative Royce, is also talking about a clearinghouse for derivatives. I mean, that was hugely missing, and that, you know, if maybe that had been in place, maybe we wouldn't have gotten to that situation. So, you know, we're going to have some different things in place that maybe we won't have the problems that you're talking about.
You have to close the gaps in the regulatory process. I've said that for a number of years, and one of the things he discussed today was one of the things I was trying to do. Get a regulator at the federal level that was looking at insurance for these very concerns that I had over AIG and other institutions like that.
Right.
In terms of derivatives, the market is too opaque. We need much more clarity in that market, so that has to be addressed.
Just got 20 seconds left here. So what do you think would be the best thing as we look ahead and really kind of try to have some regulation, though, over the financial system, just quickly?
I think we have to send the message that we're not going to continue to bail out every institution that gets into trouble. The market has to understand that, and we should not, in our legislation, attach this to basically a line of credit where we're going to come in with further government money for the institution that runs into trouble. Instead, I think something much closer to traditional bankruptcy, where everybody takes a haircut, removes a lot of the moral hazard that I think this injects into the system.
All right, got to leave it there. Great to get some time with you. Representative Royce, thank you so much. Do want to mention something crossing the Bloomberg terminal.